Well, it is good to be back with you as we are beginning another Bible study here at Christ Table. My name is Kevin Young. I'm lead encourager here at Christ Table, and I'm so glad that you are here with us for this study as we are walking through 7 weeks where we are looking at different literary genres in the Bible. And if you would like to join us on this journey, you can be a part of that by going to that URL right there on your screen, go.christstable.today/the book. And there you can find a few things. You can find a PDF copy of this Bible study that you can utilize to walk through each and every one of these 24 days with us. Or you can also get a hard copy of that there. You can get the box that has the hard copy of that study that also has the book that it's kind of based upon, the Book of the People by A.N. Wilson. You'll get a few gifts in there that are a part of that, as well as support this ministry. And we encourage you to do that if you are able to financially support us. But the resources are also there for free for you as well, if you're unable to, or if you just want to join us without donating. Go.christstable.today/the book. Now, we find ourselves during these 7 weeks looking at 7 different types of literary genres in the Bible, which I know for some of us may sound a little bit boring. To me, it's pretty interesting, but I think that you're going to find that it actually is pretty fascinating to see how different places in the Bible actually communicate and teach us different things. Now, first, we are going to be looking at the historical Jesus. And so we're going to kind of run through some different interesting and fascinating places in the Gospels. And if you have the study book or you have the PDF that goes along with it, there are going to be some questions in here that are going to help you navigate further beyond this study. And if you have children or youth, there are also some adolescent and youth conversation starters and some discussion questions in there as well that are a little bit more age appropriate for kids. Now, for us, what I'm going to do here each and every day is just kind of give a bit of a run through of the text that we're going to be looking at for that day, and maybe just a few insights as well to kind of help you see a bit behind the scenes what's there. But I don't want to give away too much because I'm also interested in hearing what you think. We do these Bible studies live. I have the comments that pop up over here if you're watching them live with us. And then I also pay attention to the comments in the chat during the day and during the week because I know that a lot of people aren't able to be here with us live. So today, historical Jesus. This week, historical Jesus. And we are going to be in Mark chapter 1, verses 35 through 39. Mark is my favorite gospel out of all of them. He doesn't get a lot of fanfare. It's the shortest. So if you like reading short things, Mark is the one for you. But it also is the one that tends to be the most action-packed about Jesus. And so we see some things about Jesus in this very compact gospel that we don't see in other places. And today we're going to look into something that we don't really talk about with Jesus very much or very often. And that is silence and solitude. We don't think of Jesus as being very silent. He speaks a lot, and we don't think of him spending very much time in solitude, except maybe for those 40 days that he spent in the desert where he was tempted by the devil. Now, even during that 40-day solitude, the part that we focus on isn't the solitude. The part that we focus on are the 3 temptations, and maybe we're missing something when they do that. So Mark chapter 1, verse 35. Before daybreak the next morning, and this is Mark 1, so this is at the very beginning of his ministry, very early. So before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out into an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went out to find him, and when they find him, they said to him, "Everyone's looking for you." Now, I know that whenever you first read this, it may be difficult to see. You may be like me. You just kind of run straight through it and don't think very much about what's being said here because on the surface, everything seems normal. But there are a few things that we need to pay attention to in this. And the first thing that we want to pay attention to is the fact that Jesus is praying. Now, I know that, we would expect Jesus to pray, but this is something that isn't just random. It's not willy-nilly. What we see whenever we see Jesus praying and the disciples praying and the apostles praying is that typically they are praying very specific prayers at very specific times. They had a routine. They had a rhythm of prayer. And we talk about that a lot around here, how it is important for you to, whether you kind of feel like it or not, to have a routine or rhythm of prayer. Maybe that's when you wake up in the morning, just before you reach over and grab the phone. I know it's hard to do, even for me. I kind of want to grab the phone first. Maybe at night, just before bed. It may be at the beginning of meals. If that's the most that you get and that's your routine and that's your rhythm, don't feel too badly. Okay? If you want to do more than that, I want to add a noontime prayer or a specific time at maybe 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. or something else, then that's great. And you're beginning to move towards this idea of what first century Jews would have done, and that is to have a regular routine of prayer. And if that feels a little difficult for you, maybe go online, get a book of prayers, download some prayers, and simply read the prayer. And even if it's the same prayer every day, what's the problem with that? The Lord's Prayer, right? So before daybreak the next morning, so we're kind of jumping into the story here. Jesus gets up and he goes out into an isolated place to pray. And his new disciples freak out. Later, Simon and the others go out to find him. And in fact, they're not even here. They're not labeled his disciples. They're not labeled his apostles yet. It just says that Simon and that the group of the others go out to find him. Now, here, my New Living Translation that I typically use is they went out to find him. If you have the NIV, it will say something kind of along the lines of they went out to, I may be getting this wrong, to search for him or to look for him. The Revised Standard Version, I think, says find him or follow him. Find him, I think, as well. None of these really kind of get at what's going on here, because the word that's used here is more along the lines of manhunt, in that this wasn't just a, hey, let's go find JC. This is a, we have to find him right now. This is an emergency. This is an all points bulletin. Everybody spread out, link arms, and let's go find this dude wherever he is. Why? Well, we find out in the next verse. Whenever they found him, they said, everyone is looking for you. So why did they find Jesus? They wouldn't find Jesus because essentially we know this from within context, is that in Capernaum, Jesus had been doing miracles. And this is at the very beginning of his ministry. And for somebody to show up and be doing miracles and be doing healing people, you're going to be an immediate superstar. Everybody is going to be at your doorstep. And they weren't at your doorstep because they wanted to hear Jesus teach. They weren't at the doorstep because they wanted to hear about Jesus' relationship with God. They weren't at his doorstep because they wanted to be spiritually held and hear his prayers and feel close to God. No. They were at his doorstep because they wanted the hangnail healed. They were at his doorstep because they wanted the cleft palate fixed. They were at his doorstep because they wanted to see the blind begin to see, and those who were ill or infirm be healed. They wanted a show. And Simon and these other disciples, they are looking forward to giving people a show. Jesus, people want you. Jesus, people are at your doorstep. I don't know what you're doing spending time here praying, because you're just wasting time. There are far more important things to do. You can go in your closet, you can go out into the desert, and you can pray at any point, but get up off your knees. Real ministry needs to be done. This is what's going on here. Everyone's looking for you, Jesus. They're all waiting down in Capernaum for you, and you are wasting time. Come on, what are you doing? Jesus replies, y'all, we're not staying here in Capernaum. This is not Sideshow Jesus, Sideshow Bill, and the 12 apostles. This is not a Disney movie. We're not going to be healing things and fixing things. This is going to be a part of what we do, but this is not the primary thing that we are focused on here. We're about a lot more. We got to go to other towns as well. I'm going to preach to there too. This is why I came. I did not come to sit here and to have a circus in the city of Capernaum, y'all. I know this is exciting. I know this is your family. I know these are all the people that you know and love, and you're probably seeing dollar signs. You're thinking people are going to pay for this kind of thing here. That's not what we're about. We're about preaching. That's why it came. So he traveled throughout the region of Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and casting out the demons. Now, Jesus has elevated, and I want to make sure that we kind of point this out for just a moment. Jesus has clearly now elevated his mission, his ministry, his teaching and preaching, and that he's going to do that broadly. He's now elevated that above miracles. But he's also elevated something additional above that. Did you catch it? He has elevated solitude and silence above healings and preaching. Now, I don't want to necessarily say or imply that that's always the order, that solitude and silence is of highest priority for Jesus, and then preaching and teaching, and then miracles. But I'm also not so certain that isn't the way that it was. That one flowed out of the other, that silence and solitude was the center and the core. His relationship, his interaction with God, with his Father, was central to his identity, was central to his mission, was central to who he was. And then out of that flowed his preaching, flowed his teaching, flowed all of the things that he is on record as saying. And then out of those things flowed signs, the miraculous. So it may well be that we should say that solitude and silence are sacred, more sacred, and maybe even most sacred. Jesus actually models this. Whenever we see him at some of the high watermarks in his ministry life, we've already talked about the 40 days that was at the very beginning of his ministry, whenever temptations happened. Now we see him in solitude and silence. Here we're going to see that happening where he goes up to a mountain to pray just before one of the famous moments where the storm comes onto the Sea of Galilee, and the apostles and the disciples are flipping out. They think that they're going to drown, and Jesus comes walking by as though he's just going to kind of ignore the fact that they're about to die in the boat, or they think that they're about to die in the boat. And he's been off praying. Feeding the 5,000 includes in that moment as well Jesus being off alone by himself. We see this rhythm and this routine, not just of prayer, but of isolation, of solitude, and of silence. And so I wonder that maybe when we begin looking at this historical Jesus for these next few days in the book, if maybe it isn't best for us to start by looking at this historical Jesus from the moments where we don't see him, where we don't hear him, where he is off somewhere else, where he is silent, in solitude, in prayer. Maybe the missing Jesus is the most important Jesus to the Jesus who we know. What renews you? Where do you go to center, to pray, to be in solitude, and to reconnect with something or someone greater than yourself? And I would suggest that God, Jesus, should be on the radar, or it may be helpful to be on the radar for those moments. Jesus teaches us that silence and solitude are sacred. Are they sacred moments in your life that you cling to and that you regularly return to? If not, maybe following the example of Jesus, well, maybe that's the lesson for today. Until tomorrow, happy reading.